I think of what we do anytime we make a mark, whether it's with a pencil or a brush or something. Um, there's five characteristics. There's five things that are going on. What you want to do, why you're doing it, what your intentions are, how it came to be. And you can't get around that. And every one of these here started with something. It could have been, I needed to make a painting because there's a show coming up, or maybe you have a desire to paint a picture of a grandchild and have it ready for Christmas. Everybody, whatever it is, there's no right or wrong about it. And so of the five things, I'm going to spend less time on the first two because they're so personal and there isn't any right or wrong. The other one is feeling, how you feel about something. We don't have a tube of serene or beautiful or quiet or anything. But if you don't feel it and have it in your goals before you ever start, it's not likely it's going to make it into the final result. You don't know exactly what it's going to take, but at least you want to have the urge that that would be nice to do. So something that isn't talked about a lot is that in the early stages, we can observe, we can feel, we can drink in impressions of our people that we're going to paint, and we can store them away. And then we can get to work. And then from time to time, we can take a pause, as you should, and say, wait a minute now. I was, when I first saw her and she sat down in the chair, I thought she was really beautiful or delicate, or he was strong or handsome or quiet or shy. Or, you want to conjure up those first feelings that you had before you started just measuring. Here's the top of the head and here's the chin and that kind of stuff. There's time for that, but you want to stop and say, no, wait a minute. How am I doing? Am I actually achieving what I had in mind? And so that's why I say that what you want, what you feel come first and a priority, because everything that you do follows from that. We'll spend less time on that because it's personal. It's you. You can't be wrong about it. What you feel is what you feel. And two people could be painting the same model and have different impressions, reactions, and that's okay. That's okay. It's all valid. What you feel, what you want is yours. Now, the next two are the ones we'll concentrate on mostly here today. And they have to do with all the judgments we're going to make in making realistic art, representational art, making something kind of come alive. And that is what we see and what we know. All right, and I'll skip ahead and I'll tell you the fifth one is execution, is to do it. That has to do with all the craft related things. It's one thing to look up and say, I recognize that from here to there is a straight line. There's something else to be able to draw a straight line. So there's observation, judgment, and all that, getting it, figure out what you want, and then there's the ability to pull it off. Whether you know what color you want, but do you know how to mix it? Do you know what's going to happen when you put these colors down, let them dry, and then come back another day and glaze over them with another color? That's execution. And what's really important for all of us is to take a self-inventory and know what our weak suits might be, what lags behind, and work on those the most. Now, ironically or unfortunately, usually the thing that we're the weakest at, that we're struggling with, is the thing we don't like to do, which is probably why it ended up being our weak suit, because we kind of neglected it. But the good news, and I hope you'll get excited about this, is that while we don't believe in something for nothing, it's as close as it gets. If you have an area that you've kind of been neglecting, whether it's anatomy or perspective or color mixing or drawing or composition, whatever it is, it's sort of like the horses pulling a team of horses. The slow one is going to kind of dictate the pace of the whole cart. And if you can identify that one, make it stronger, all of a sudden the whole thing goes better. Does that make sense? What you see and what you know. Now, you've probably heard various quotes from different artists about this subject. And there are people on either extreme. There's people that say, you're not painting things, you're just painting light. Okay, the colorists are real strong on that. It kind of started with Monet. And he had some points, that he felt like up to his time, people were painting things kind of using formulas. Somebody in the past told him what color the sky's supposed to be, and they didn't. And so he says, no, we should look at it. So he's all for seeing, painting what you see. And then on the other hand, there's the people that will tell you that none of us really draw or paint anything that we don't understand, that we grasp it a little bit. We're not just copying. And I'm of the camp that the two of them are not adversaries. What you see and what you know, I feel strongly about that. It's a central part of my thesis, my teaching is going to be. They're symbiotic, and one of them can help pull the other one out of the fire a little bit when you have trouble. Sometimes the light is so flat you can't really understand what's going on with the form, but because you study a little bit of anatomy, you say, "Oh, I get it." Though what looks like it's just random bumps or something, that's edge of the scapula, and that's you understand it, and all of a sudden those bumps kind of line up, and you understand what you're seeing. So you want both. You want both. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna make some comments on some individual paintings here, and we'll make some more general ideas. But many of these have some great sense of feeling and what the person wanted. And I know critique, the prime the key word there is critic and criticize. But I think we're here to learn. We're here for some ideas, and some of what I'm going to say is about what's working, and we can all learn. And those that brought the paintings, I'll try to think of something negative to say so you won't feel shortchanged. But really, what's important is to understand when something is working and why is it working. It's one thing to look at a painting and say, "Oh, I like that," but if you're going to try to do it yourself, you kind of wonder, what it take. First thing that struck me about this, and we'll just say a few things, is that this represents one of the things that you really want to see. Why bother? I think most of these probably have photographic basis, and I certainly use photographs when I need to. But it's nice if you can bring out some quality above and beyond, And my first impression was how soft the hairs were right here, how nice it more than this one, more than it had there's a quality about it that the photograph didn't have. I know one thing she wants to do is that whatever comes next, you don't want to. Dan Green wants to, Nancy probably remembers this, a workshop about how many years? 81? What is that?
I can't even remember.
That's 81, 80, 81. Somebody asked him, "How do you know when you're done?" He says, "Well, when I start making it worse."
Yeah.
It's probably a pretty good answer, Do what you can, do what you can. And I would say, in her case, be careful not to lose some of this that's working so well if you try to make more of it down here, In other words, sometimes what the reason for having this want and feel at the very top and being very clear about what you're shooting for is that you can refer back to it, and everything you do to the painting, you can ask yourself playing against that, say, is what I'm adding now helping or hurting? Is it making it better? Is it contributing it to my idea? So when you're putting your marks down on your drawing or your painting, you understand you're not just, it's so tedious to just say, "Oh, a little lighter here, a little darker there, a little lighter here, a little darker here," and hope that you're going to get it right. I'm not saying you don't observe it, pay attention to it, and try to make it as like as you can. But if you understand what's going on, you understand the nature of light and shadow. Here comes the light. It's hitting here. It's not hitting here. It's bouncing there. It's doing this. There's some rhyme or reason to it all. It's just much more harmonious experience. And you look up at it and you say, "Aha, that makes sense." And you can kind of monitor your painting and see how it's progressing. And also, the artist who understands what they're doing, rather than just copying what they see in front of them, they have the thing that we all really want the most, which is the latitude, the freedom to take liberties with it, to edit a little bit. You can't do that if you don't have if you're just copying. That's what you want as an artist. You want to be able to look and say if you recognize there's a reflected light running all the way down the face, and you say, "Okay, it's hitting here, 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 here," because it's reflected light because it's coming from over there, and you decide you don't like the color of it, you could change it. You could make another color there. But if you didn't understand that all these were connected and that that's what it was, you wouldn't have that option, you see. So the story I'm seeing is that light was coming from hitting the left side of his head. That's the primary direction of it. Yet there was some coming here. We can see it along the side of his head, and we see it right here. And that's fine. But sometimes, because what we're doing is making an illusion, we don't like to use the word because it doesn't sound sophisticated enough for us. But in a way, we're kind of magicians. We don't want to think we're the card playing tricksters or something. But the fact is, we're taking flat surfaces and we're spreading paint around, hoping that when we finish, somebody's going to say, "Wow, there's a face." There, of the 3Ds, the third one is the depth. We got the left and right, the up and down handle. It's the depth, and so anything goes if you can make your illusion. And sometimes you want to strengthen what you see, just underscore it a little bit. So there'll be others that make the same point. By the way, this is strong in the first areas I was talking about. A lot of these are the character. This is you feel like you could talk to him, him. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. But I did want to I want to bring out this. I'm going to bring up this one and a couple others, and we'll come back to them all. But one of the
Tom, can I ask you about the hair? Because it was really hard for me with someone who had hair sticking up all over it and it was wispy.
yeah.
I'm like, how do I approach that with, light?
When I do a portrait, I control the whole thing, including the background color. So I have to decide, first of all, as part of my want and what I feel is how important is it to show his hair? What do I want to say about it? Do I want it to look like it's wispy? Do I want to try to you can emphasize or de-emphasize any characteristic that you choose within limits. Does that make sense? Sometimes the answer, you talk about execution, just to pull it off, is to make a run at it, kind of boldly. And if it doesn't work, you do it again. In other words, like wet paint, background and brush into it. Sometimes that's the way to get softness, is to have one color blended into another. What we see in real life, we look at each other here, you look at the person in the room there, we don't have any problem understanding and recognizing that's a person. It doesn't mean that a picture or a drawing of them is going to be as clear when it's all flattened out. Sometimes we have to push it a little bit to make it more workable or more stronger. And by that, I mean, our brain's very sensitive and our eyes to just seeing in real life. But in our paintings, when there's light coming from all sorts of different directions and the eyes are looking at it and trying to make sense of it all, maybe one way of helping it along is to use different colors, because the brain might be saying, well, wait a minute, the light's coming from here, but then we got some light here. What's that all about? But often in real life, it is two colors. Outside, it could be the sun hitting it, and then the blue sky coming down and making some blue into another part, or in the shadows. You see a lot of paintings with edges of side light, a little different color than the rest. This is an example. Is Lisa here? There we go. Here, Lisa. Okay. I'm going to hold this up because it's not real large. I think we all agree, very competent. I'll have to find something negative to say just so she won't feel like I didn't give her due. But, beautiful painting. One of the things that's working here is that, this dancer has more than one light striking her. They're slightly different colors. Just so you can see that. The top of her hair and this edge along here has the cooler, bluer edge to it. See that? And then this little bit here, you see how warm that is? And the hair, more of a yellow Okay, and that helps us as the viewer, it helps our brain make sense of it all and separate it all. What also is interesting about it, we haven't talked about composition, but composition and design is an important part of what we do. And you've probably heard rules, right? There's books, people with composition rules, do three of things, thirds, Fibonacci series of ratios and what have you. Don't do this, don't do that. And how the figure is placed on the page is one of those that people have some thoughts on. And one of them is a popular one is give the person some room to look into. Maureen did one of those, which we'll see later. And that's pretty common, like a portrait somebody sitting a head and shoulders portrait, and they're turned to one side, maybe a little extra room there for them to look into. But here, got a special case. We want to show a dancer with their arms out. So she went with this horizontal format, the arm out here, and it works. If you have some painting that's kind of far along, maybe almost done, and you have some thoughts, perhaps maybe I should change something. What I do, hey, I'll take a picture of it. I'll take a picture and I'll print it out in a cheap copy paper, and I'll get out some colored pencils and draw on it. See, and I'll say, oh, that wasn't a very good idea. Let's try a different one. So I would experiment with maybe make this arm a little more definition, just a little bit more. But I know that, again, this is her vision. She likes the beauty, the feeling of what the dancer's doing. It's out here filling this space, justifying it being this long. But this arm is a little brighter, and I know that's probably where the light was. But it's just an idea. Maybe totally wrong, but I'll just throw it out there. Maybe pop this one just a little more intensity on this arm, maybe a little less on that. And then here's a one you're not expecting. Maybe for a balance, I take these things seriously. I might have signed it over here, because your name has weight, And I always try to err on the side or really refer to principles rather than rules. One of the principles is taught to me by Bjorn Egli, Cedric Egli's late father, who's a patriarch of that whole family. When he was teaching me back in '74, and we were talking about cutoff points. That's something on portraits, right? Y'all have to figure out where to crop things. Unless you're painting the whole figure, unless you get feet and all, it's going to get cut somewhere. And so where does that go? You want to look at through the viewer's eyes and ask, is it going to be confusing to them? Is it going to be distracting? What are they going to, what their viewers' expectations? Because there's more than one way of doing these things. I had a portrait that had to be cut off in the thighs. They wanted it to fit over the pouch. He was wearing black pants. Well, I painted the background near the pants, dark, not as dark as the pants, but dark. So there was less, big emphasis on those. Added more emphasis and contrast up higher, so your eyes would go there. And then, people don't think about this, the frame matters. So you can actually, your framing choices can pull a picture out of the fire. You can paint a picture and get all done and say, man, I wish I would have given a little more space between the top of the head and up here. Well, just get a frame and don't have to match the color, but get some values of the frame and the edge of it that are the same as your background. And the eye will see that as a little more space. Believe it or not, as difficult and challenging as painting can be, painting, just trying to paint what you're looking at is the easiest compared to taking liberties with it. I don't mean that you can make mistakes easily, and have it not look like it. But compared to say, look right at something and then deliberately decide, okay, I want it like that, except I want it to be different. That's a little complicated because so much of what we do is comparing things to other things. When somebody asks me to make them to do something different, I had a lady years ago, and David knows this because I put it a line in my song, Portrait Painting Blues. I said, "Will you paint me my new red dress? But ooh, could you make it blue?" And actually, my experience, that particular one was reversed, but it didn't rhyme. She had on a blue dress, and she said, "Can you make it red?" And it's not a matter of just making up a red dress. I got out some cloth, and when she posed, we wrapped it around her shoulders because I knew, that's where the knowledge part comes in, how this red dress was going to reflect up under her jawline and be entirely different than having a blue dress. Yeah, painting what you see and then taking liberties with it is a challenge. But some of you have taken that on, and my hat is off to you for trying that. And this is an example right here. There you go. Can everybody see that? Okay, you can see what she's done. You know, this tells me that this painting is real strong on the personal want side. She has a vision of what she wants. But the point is, it's harder. It's harder to not paint. It would be easier to just, to paint that dress. But look at, she's changed the chair. She's put didn't want a folding chair, and wanted to do I gotta think there's some latent Van Gogh love in this artist a little bit. Hello?
Oh, you want to know?
Yeah, love to hear more about it.
Well, the photograph was from this,
Look.
one of our Monday bottom sessions where we draw, and so I got a photograph. And I had really no intention of, I was kind of frustrated with trying to paint what I see. And I didn't really want to just copy her. I wanted to make it completely different.
Yeah,
So I just approached it even from the beginning differently than I normally do.
there you go.
But I kind of stopped because I got stuck. And I just invented the background and was trying to change color.
Well, I applaud you. And when we try to do things that are a little out of our comfort zone, we learn. We learn what we know, and I give you some suggestions that you can keep on what you're doing. For one thing, what's your background colors, and kind of swallowing up the dress. Well, that's a common device. You see it, and when Rembrandt, with the man in a dark suit, a dark background, it draws attention to the face and hands. You see it with business people. You see it with anybody who's got a subject maybe worried about their weight. Just swallow it up with the background, But here, it's beautiful, and your colors have a nice impressionistic quality going on right now. But one thing you can do, which would probably help, would be sharpening some edges here and there, just selectively. But you can go darker right across there, and right in here. You can see it's happening on her. And believe it or not, you don't have to go too dark. You can sneak down to it, go sneak down to it if you don't want to make a hole in the canvas. But it's amazing how the difference in value is the little touches. Like when you do a nose, making the one nostril on the light side, maybe just a little warmer, a little bit lighter than the other one, where the light's kind of glowing through. It doesn't have to be dramatic, maybe just a little bit, but our eyes will pick up on it. So you could just sneak it down a little bit, put a little more definition here and there. But anyway, I think don't give up on it. It's coming along great.
I'll go back to it.
Yeah. Let's talk. This one is breaking fade. This is the artist. Tell us a little bit about it.
A friend of mine was just sharing a picture of her grandson. She was so proud of him. And it's like, oh, you gotta see my grandson. And what I liked about the photo so much was I darkened the background to make the child stand out more. But in the actual photo, the baby and the background almost totally go together. And then the way his eyes, that je ne sais quoi, like he's not exactly smiling, and he's not exactly sad, and he's gripping his mother, and he's
Maybe a little curious,
Yeah,
kind of
curious.
observing this other person that's behind mom.
Yeah, like what is he
Yeah.
looking at? And-
Yeah, right. Well, we can talk a lot about the colors and things like that. We will, but I tell you, first off, one of the strong suits, one of the interesting things is this concept of the baby is the focal point, but we do have the mother. It kind of just a sliver, and they're not really featured. And there's precedent for that. You're familiar with Cecilia Bowes' work? She's got a famous one. You've probably seen it. A little girl basically fills the whole painting, and she's got her hand up like that, and the mother's holding it on. You don't see any of the mother, but she's kind of a little bit. But it's all about the girl, all about the child, and this is kind of reminds me of that. It's just perfectly fine, to have the interaction there. So yeah, you could even go darker with the background. Um, when you have a photo that's questionable, that you're thinking it really needs some changes. Well, you have a choice, how much you want to experiment on this one. When I do a bigger canvas, I'll have a second canvas, and one that I feel I can be very bold with. I can just thrash around on and try things. And if they don't work, and there's no harm, no foul. I'll usually have a quarter size study nearby, and then I'll thrash around on that. I'll move things around. I'll try. And so when you have a subject that you're really not certain, you can do that on a second one. Do thumbnails. Sometimes you just take a piece of canvas set or something and divide it up into four. Do 4 little pictures where you use a basic different color for the background and for the face. You don't have to paint the whole thing. You just do a little thumbnail check. And you don't have to you don't have to work with more than about 3 colors in an area to kind of see a harmony that starts to work. You might mix up a color that you think is kind of good for the basic skin, one for this blue, maybe one for the hair or the background, and just keep mixing those. Just modify those, like stirring into the puddle until it kind of sinks, and you'll be surprised because just a little lighter, a little greener, a little yellow, or a little duller, a little brighter. There's a lot of ways that a color can shift. And yet, those little differences can make all the difference between whether it looks chalky or vibrant or whatever. And if you don't try to do it with 100 colors, just pick out a few. This is anything you paint, still life, landscape. Pick a few areas of it that you want to that are important, big areas of color, and decide you're going to get those spots relative to each other to kind of sing. Work with it. And if you don't feel like comfortable on this, just take a second little canvas and try some face colors. And you'll be surprised how much darker you can get. Particularly if you make this darker, it'll kind of give you permission to go darker with the face. And when it goes darker, you have more room to model it. It's hard to model everything within a real narrow band of values.
And with skin that light, would you naturally want to go a little bit darker? The baby is white.
Right. Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how light that baby would still look if you went darker with the background.
Okay.
Let's look at Maureen's. She's a new member, and she sent in 2 very different paintings. And she's not here, but we're able to look at them on the screen, and hopefully she's watching. And very interesting. I don't know. Unfortunately, she's not here. As I said, I want to be fair to everybody. I'd like to know what they were thinking, so I have to kind of read between the lines. I know by the names that she gave them that these are both strong on a feeling, and they're probably very personal. And she's got some thoughts. This isn't necessarily standard portrait. Somebody says, paint me, make me look good. But look how different they are in treatment. I would love to ask her about this one. Very strong in light and shadow and a sense of form, right? And yet one of the fascinating things that she has done is this textured background, but it doesn't stop here. She's actually writing, you see it here? So I'm guessing it was painted first and then the dress over top of it. One thing that kind of indicates is a certain sureness. I doubt that she was struggling over the painting of the dress and then went and put some of these things to match the rest of the background. You had this feeling like it was down there and she just painted that dress like she knew what she was doing. There's a lot of nice things working here. And, oh, do you have the name?
I think that's possibilities.
Yeah, possibilities, okay. So you see, that one is it's got some heartfelt ideas that she's trying to convey, and that's really what matters. And obviously, she's looking at a book, she's thinking something. We can appreciate it on a lot of different levels, and there's no reason why not. An artist might have their goals, and somebody might come along and just love it for their own personal reasons, and that's okay. You don't know. I like the way that she's done the hair. You know, the back is nice. The shapes are interesting. Lot going on. But what's really striking is how she had the boldness, the variety in her game, so to speak, to do this painting. It's entirely different, right? Outdoor, kind of a flat, overcast light. And this one is called Her Thoughts. So again, I wish she was here to tell us a little bit about what she's doing, but remember I referred to the fact that sometimes you give a face a room to look into. So she's looking over this way. One thing I would fix right away is I'd make this shoreline or whatever horizon line more horizontal. One principle of composition is that you don't want anything that bothers or distracts from what you're trying to say. Unless what you're trying to do is bother people, you know. You can make a painting that's sort of meant to be discordant and disruptive and you know, whatever, something along those lines. But if you're trying to basically portray this woman thinking in her own little world, you don't want anything that will cause the viewer to say, well, what's going on back here? You know, am I turned? But I would suggest, if she can hear us, that she looks into an artist she made me a fan of, Jules Bastian Lepage. I'm bad at pronouncing things. I don't always pronunciate them well because I learned so much from books. There's a painting at the Metropolitan. You can look it up. Bastian Lepage, Joan of Arc. Maybe you're familiar with that one. And there's several others. And he could paint. They call them naturalist painters, and they paint outdoors without this real obvious cut and dried light and shadow atelier kind of art school thing that is where your form is the only God, you know. And I look at those paintings because it's so unlike what I usually do, and say, you know, how in the world does he do it? Because it's subtle, but it works. And so look at some of those paintings. It's good to study paintings that are different from what you do, and try to figure out how they're doing it. I can tell you a few principles. One is the more subtle the situation that you're trying to solve, whether it's close-knit colors or drawing where shapes and lines are very similar, the more things are not so like dramatically obviously different, the more important it is for you not just to pay attention, but to try to understand what's going on. We haven't talked about edges so much, but hard and soft edges are not just how crisp they are, but also what the contrast is between the two juxtaposed spots. Look at how the sky and the shoulder are very close, yet she's maintained what David Lafell would call the integrity of the shape. You still tell where the shape ends, so she's got a shoulder, doesn't completely melt into the sky, but it's not cut out either. And then right diagonally across from it over here, these values are very similar. See that? And also, as I said, we're just creating illusions, and sometimes exaggeration, simplifying, compressing values, all those kind of things can be done to make whatever it was you had in mind stronger. And again, that's why we start with what we want, what was important, you know? Was her idea to convey this woman with her thoughts, her feelings, and this mood? How important is it to show all the contours of this skirt? You know, maybe it is. I'm not to say. I'd like to see some slightly warmer colors in here between the fingers. We could talk all day long about little details. Probably up here on the forehead, a little bit too dark as this tone comes into the light. But I do like the hair against the background, you know, that adds a lot. That little extra shape, I think that makes it more interesting, but that's just, you know, personal. Anyway, she's obviously, she paints what she feels. She's not just out there, you know, copying stuff, making exercises. Both of these things have some meaning to her. And I'm just sorry that she wasn't able to attend and can tell us a little bit more about them. So what else we got? Along those lines, this painting here is, I'm going to butcher your name. Yes. Yeah. These are both yours.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that. Now this one you signed. Okay, so we're done with this.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and this one you're still working on.
Yeah, sure.
All right. I'll have to ask you, now this is, you've got the line here, which is kind of mirrors the bigger shape. Is that a way of kind of getting started, kind of blocking things in?
Yeah.
Work within it? Is that?
At the beginning, I didn't know how big I should make this
Uh-huh.
to be, so I sort of sketched some things just to give myself an idea, you know, how big the person or
Yeah,
the portrait should become.
yeah.
So that's the line.
There you go. There you go. Four things, what I call the SSS&P. Okay, I'm coining that. That would be in my book. The SSS&P. That stands for size, scale, scope, and placement. And the size is the only one that has like two aspects to it. Size has to do with you choosing the size of your canvas, you know, before you ever start. And so you can walk up to a canvas on the given side, you've already committed to something just by choosing that canvas. And then there's how big, what you were talking about, how big you're going to make the picture, the person or the subject, how big it's going to be. And then size, scale and size are not the same thing. You could draw two 10-inch heads, and one of them is an adult and one is a child. And the adult could be a life-size head, and the 10-inch child's head is an oversize. So their scale is different. You follow me, the difference? So size and scale aren't the same, right? So how big is your subject, what you're drawing compared to the actual thing? And that can be a little bit dicey to measure, because where do you measure? If somebody's posing for you and you want to make a life size and you make their head life size and their knees are in front, how wide, you know, they're going to maybe be a little bigger than life size, depending how close you are and exactly what the pose is. But anyway, you got size, scale, and then there's another S, which is scope. And that has to do with kind of what we referred to earlier as the cropping off. I can do a head and shoulders, a head and collar, head and shoulders, half length, 3/4, full length, you know. But size, scale, scope, okay, and placement. The good news is these four things are so interrelated that you don't, what you do is you decide which is most important. And then the tail doesn't wag the dog, you know? When you walk up there with a 16 by 20 canvas, you have already determined that if you paint the full body, head to foot, they're going to be under scale. You could do head life size and maybe get part of the upper body, but you're not going to get much more than that. They're all related, so you just choose what's most important to you. So the only thing is to decide up front as much as you can, you know, what you want. Now, artists do it different ways. Some will do little thumbnails, separate ones, and others will do it on the canvas itself, like you did your great big shape. Anything, whatever works for you. In order to have softness, you need hardness. It's like music. You can't have everything loud or everything soft, but if you have something loud, the soft sounds softer. And the same thing with drawing and painting. Dan Green workshop. You remember the fellow with we're going back, had a red beret. And Dan was talking about edges, and I never totally grasped what we we're doing. But we were working in pastel, put a sharp edge, I did finally after watching him, where the beret hit the forehead. Nice crisp edge. There's the hat, there's a man-made thing, there's the forehead. No reason for it to be blurry or anything. It's right there in the light. And all of a sudden, I said, wow, my flesh that I'd already painted and been working hard to make it look soft and fleshy started looking softer, fleshier because of the hard thing. This painting and this painting, both are real strong on personal character, you know? We haven't talked about that, but that's a component of portraiture, the characterization, you know? And if I'll just digress a little bit. Don't you feel like you've seen her, maybe know her, maybe she's got a little, I feel a little attitude and it's consistent, you know? That raise of the eyebrow and the shoulder, you know, no matter how much work the rest of the colors and drawing and stuff may need to refine it, she's already saying to me, yeah, there's a person there. That's not just a bunch of marks and approximation of things. There, she's got a little, she's got a little attitude. She's kind of got the eyebrow going, you know, and that's good. That's good. You don't want to try to plug those things after the fact. You can polish it up and make it look more real. And that's one of the first things that struck me about that painting. We'll get back to that one. But this one is the same kind of thing. Look at her expression, right? And look at her looking over here, and she's kind of looking at her sideways. I mean, you painted. There's a story here. Talk to us a little bit about your painting.
So it's a friend of mine's family, the lady on the right, two daughters, the two older ones. I mean, the one in the middle is
Lady,
yeah, she has the one above her and the one on the left.
this one are her daughters.
Yeah, and that's her niece.
Her niece,
But yeah, a friend of mine took it, you know, Sunday dinner, and at the time I was looking for something to paint, and I was really you know, trying to learn composition and like you said, the rules
Right.
and I saw that and I was just like, I thought about how much your eye bounced around all the faces, like you just said, like you look over there, you're over there, and you're over there.
Well, you know, you bring up a point about the eyes, huh? It's got a story, you know. She's looking at her, she's looking at her, she's making a face, you know. I mean, there's a lot of human activity going on here. And that reminds you about you can learn all you want about form and color and painting still lifes and things, but there's something very special, as we all know, we have a bias as portrait painters, to the human face. And the eyes, just two little irises, are just little dots. And yet shifting from one side just a little bit changes the whole feeling of the composition, you know, it throws the weight, the direction, you know, her looking this way, her looking that way. Imagine if she was looking out the other way, or she was looking this way, a whole different story, you know. I will say, I wasn't planning on this, but this probably is good an opportunity. We're talking about using what we know, right? So I think you all know when we look down on a circle, it looks like round. And if we look right at the edge, it's a straight line, and everywhere in between is ellipses, right? I bring that up because here, this right here needs to be This is bigger, this is shallower. It's just, I would look at all those. I'm thinking now maybe, I'm not even sure, this has got to be the near edge, so we're above it. So this in here should be in between this one and that one. Anyway, that's where the knowledge can help you. It really comes into play when it gets real subtle. You've got a complicated arrangement and you've got some vases and pots, and some are closer, some are further, some are higher, some are lower. And if you're just copying, if you're just using your eyeball, then you've got to say, oh, how much is this curved than that? But if you know ahead of time, well, that's got to be more curved than that. Even though it's subtle, that's good to know. It's helpful. I can see what's happening. See the crisscrossing shadows?
Yeah, the two like,
Yeah, one's coming this way, one's going that way. And so one kind of cancels out the shadows of the other. When you have that situation, I generally pick one as the winner. And you can have them both, but don't make them just so equal that they cancel each other out. Pick one, and I would say, and maybe go with the rest of the picture. Like here, seems a little more light coming from this side, so I'd probably do it here. I'd make a little more shadow here, and lighten up this where this runs into this cheek. Huh?
Kim, yeah,
You're Kim, yeah, Kim, both of these. This your son.
yes.
You know, when I first looked at this, I thought, well, that is obviously a labor of love. This is somebody she knows. Yeah, turns out it's her son. And I looked at him and I think, well, maybe I shouldn't say what I was going to say. Because my first impression is perhaps this eye is too big, you know? And I said, well, he's got big eyes. The little guy. And that's kind of what happens sometimes. Our eyes don't change so much. So when you're little, your eyes are bigger. But I still think maybe just a hair, you know, just a hair. This was a little bit too big. And what happens, this is just natural. We all do it. And I mentioned before, when we're interested in something and we zero in, we zoom in with our eyes and it fills our mind's eye, it becomes bigger. That's one of the biggest problems with proportion, is keeping track of proportions, is that the things we get interested in, we see them bigger. And so you have to continually kind of pull back and take in the whole thing and compare one thing to something else somewhere else. Now this one, I know you told me this was a model, but it was a photo. The model, there's a service, they send you photos to work with.
Yeah, I thought it.
Yeah. Well, this is, there are artists that'll tell you that, I think what Sargent said, don't paint your friends because they expect something to look like them, and then you don't have the freedom to just say, well, that's not going well, and scrape it all off because you think your friend's gonna say, well, I'm out of here, I'm never gonna pose again. But if you have a model, if you can afford to pay models, you can really study and learn better, you know, and so you were trying different colors, right?
Yeah, I was really going for brush strokes.
Brush strokes,
Edges,
yeah,
something abstract.
you know, look at that eye. I love that, you know, we all are so eager to go and define things, but you can also work from the inside out, build the socket, the general form, until it comes time to where it's actually easier to kind of plug it in. This has some nice qualities in that, and we haven't talked that much about composition, but look at the repetition of the roundness, okay, and the concentric things. We have the jawline, we have the shadow, we have the clothes, we have the necklace. But then remember, variety and unity, a little variety. If this necklace was just another solid ring like this, maybe that'd be too much of that. But it's broken up by this little detail. But there's a lot of harmony and repetition there. And then it's echoed up at the top. See that? And so those kind of things are pleasing, and they allow us to come in here. Now, I think you called it the red veil, okay, which tells me, at least from the title, that you're interested in in the veil. And this has and that one both, they have a painterly quality. She's comfortable with their brush strokes. I noticed this touch right there, that touch right there, kind of reminds me how eager we were my pastel days on the street where the crowd gets behind you and you're looking around and say, okay, here we go. We're gonna put the highlight in the eye and wait for everybody to go, ooh. It's good, don't you like the way that it softens over here and just fades in? That's good. It keeps it back, brings the face forward. But if you were to want to put more detail in that, the thing would be to mass this in, back it in, flatten those out, work on the exact contours of get the red really perking, and then keep this one as a note for what you needed to do and use that to relate all the rest of these colors as you put the detail back on. Profiles. This is a profile. How many people go to a sketch group and say, oh no, I got the profile pose, right? But you shouldn't. These are great. And you've done a nice job. And I remember really studying the photograph and the care she took. This nose looks like a nose, you know? I mean, it's not just, it's the shaping of it. She paid attention. Now, every pose comes with its own priorities and on these things, the ear, and I don't see a signature and I know you're still working on it, but at some point, you know, you're going to want to pop that ear a little bit more because it's so prominent. There's just no getting around it. Sometimes little details, little specificities, like here's the neck, here's the shirt, but we know that the shirt is bigger than the body. It's outside it, just like a hat has to be bigger than a head. A wristband, a watch, it's not a tattoo. It's got to be a band. It's got to have even if it's little or big, it's got to have a little thickness to it. And it's remarkable how little things, you know, little things can make a difference in the realism and how things work for us. Here you have the light side of the face has got an even lighter background, and the dark the hair is darker. You could you can afford to go darker with all of it and still have the face pop. But
That was a hard thing with it being yellow. too,
yeah,
because
yeah.
It's catching light so much.
Well, your colors are nice, you know, you got the but you know, it was yellow and you knew it was yellow wall and maybe, but I'm betting that it's not really this bright, you know, because yellow, like everything else at a distance, it falls off and it probably got darker. But you want some contrast between the face. This might be another situation where you want to do a little thumbnail and experiment before you put it on this one. We looked at that other dancer, and Lisa has another beautiful painting. I'm guessing these background shapes have some meaning, right? They're important. They're not just random.
Yeah, the dance she was performing was an excerpt from the Nutcracker. She's dancing the Arabian.
Yeah.
So I was trying to suggest something, you know, like arches on an Arabian
Right.
building.
Yeah. Well, you did a nice job of the shape. The only problem is they're really competing with her. But probably the more problematic part for me is this arm and the veil in front of it. It's just, if you're still working on it, I give that some more attention. The cast shadow is just not, something's not quite registering. Is the arm under it? It's taken away from the rest of the beauty of it. But still very, very competent, beautiful. Look at the glow on the hair. Yvette brought in this. Now this is a perfect example of why, you know, what we feel, what we want overrides everything else. That starts, okay? And there's nothing that says every time we paint a picture, it has to have the chiaroscuro and a real heavy-handed light and shadow and a sense of form and it looked like it's Caravaggio did it or whatever, or came out of an atelier. I can think of many paintings I've seen in museums, usually in a section that had a lot of religious paintings, that have this feel. There's some very strong positive characteristics I want to point out here. One, which is, we hadn't talked about that much, but it's important, is that Yvette has given us some consistency. Consistency matters. You know, it looks like the same artist painted the whole painting. She took some real care in this detail here, in this detail, and look at this. You turn your head sideways, these all line up, these all line up. And there's a lot of things that she's done right here that with this composition that, and good composition doesn't have to hit you over the head. In fact, if you look at it, say, oh, it's so obvious what she did, then that's kind of like over the top. You want to have good composition that just works. And let's look at a few things that she's done here that I like. I mean, you notice where his body cuts the background, okay? It does not line up with this. It goes over it and runs into that one. This form right here partially overlaps that. This one sits there, partially overlaps that. There's something real bothersome when you have like something tangent, you know, just like a tree growing on the top of the head, you know, or something that's accidentally lines up, but actually the thing is behind it, but you miss that. Well, she's got things, the overlaps are working nicely. This paper overlaps here, so we see it. Variety and unity, right? We've got these different elements, different heights, but similar shape. We have the vertical nature of him, a figure, and then this same vertical nature kind of echoing, but of a smaller scale. You see how many different things are working here? And look at all the horizontals, how consistent, and then some verticals, but not too many, so the whole thing looks like a grid. We've got this arc. So compositionally, there's just an awful lot that Yvette's got going here that's right. This is a study you did.
Yeah,
Pretty quickly, like an hour or something.
I'm trying to work on painting my children from life.
Uh-huh.
And that, yeah, it was about an hour yesterday.
Your
So,
own children.
yeah.
Are they
and
cooperating with you?
He's was watching a YouTube video very closely.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, that's good. You can also work up your procedure separately, like with little mannequin heads and stuff like that,
mhm,
to where you kind of have your methods down, and then you'll be much more efficient when he poses for you.
Okay.
One thing that would be interesting to see, you've got this background color, and then you used a certain color and some white. Is it titanium white?
Mhm.
Yeah. And pretty much the same, was that
I just
Or number?
transparent oxide brown and white.
transparent oxide
Just
brown?
the-
Yeah. Well, when you're working monochromatically, you kind of have a free shot there to use whatever you like.
Mhm.
And it might be fun to get a canvas out, maybe a piece of canvas set or something, or tone it, and just paint several spheres or something using different concoctions, you know, different browns, different things. And keep it simple and see if there's maybe one that even rings true that you like it even better, you know, that when you're done, even though it's monochromatic, it still looks more fleshly like or something. There are artists in the past, probably some now, that they'll paint a whole head in burnt sienna and white and throw a little pink in the nose, cheek, and ears and call it a full color portrait. You know, you'd be surprised what's possible with just very limited colors in making an illusion. And that adds just a little fun to it, you know,
Mhm.
so that you can get the likeness, same quality and everything, but then it even seemed to glow a little bit more.
Mhm.
And that's easy enough to do without taking up your child's time. You can just experiment with that, what colors. And then while you're at it, you also can be experimenting with your application, the brushes and how you're gonna model it. And that's probably one of the biggest benefits of working like this is, we haven't used the word too much, but breadth. Everybody understands broad painting as opposed to piecemeal. That you put down an area and then you can carve into it with another and a smaller, and then it has a cohesiveness when you're done. All right, well, we all say hello, Ashley. And thank you for sending these in. If I'm painting a setup, a still life or a person, and I don't like what I'm seeing, if at all possible, I change it. And I will change the background. I have boxes of cloths. We have bins of them in the garage, all labeled. I got the greens, the blues, and the grays. And I do that stuff a lot. Just I make my background look like I want it as much as possible. In fact, I didn't have the color I wanted. I actually went to a fabric store and I went through all kinds of them just to find the color that was better. And that was just for a painting where they didn't even care what I did with the background. But I just wanted it to sing and I had to find a color that kind of worked. So that's a lot about color. But here, now I know it's difficult to photograph a painting. It's probably done quickly for us and we appreciate it. And so there's glare on it, but we can overlook that. We understand that happens. But this is a nice color. Speaking of color, this kind of a putty business here, don't you think? What do you think? And that's going to work. It's in the yellow family, which kind of works. We haven't talked that much about complementary colors, but I think it'll harmonize. She's gone with a blue for the shirt. Now, this is another example, like we talked earlier, about not painting exactly what you see. Now, whether she intends to add this pattern on, I don't know. That's one of those decisions. I can tell you it cuts both ways. First of all, it'll be a lot of work, but it also is an opportunity, like drawing cross contours. When you do a figure drawing, cross contours can help explain the form. And the stripes of his shirt kind of describe the form of his pecs and the fullness of his body. You see that? You see how the contours here of the shirt actually help? And here we don't have them because she hasn't done those yet. Doesn't mean she can't model the body the same way, but I just want to throw that in there for everybody. This, I believe, was an earlier stage because it doesn't have the background yet. And again, in fairness to her, it looks to me, because of what she's done with the hat, that she's working her way down. But this is a prime example of what we talked earlier. This is a reflected light. You see under the arm? You see it on the photograph? Okay, there's a little reflected light. However, the light is coming down from like 10 o'clock. And no matter how bright you might think this is, you got to keep that in the shadow, keep it turned under, even this one along here, and make this your light. Okay. With photographs, it'll compress those or distort those, and you just have to know to do it. And so at this point, it's reversed. It's just way too light here, too much reflected light there, and that's flattening it out. We got the little kind of a perminator running along here, but this has got to be darker. And since she hasn't darkened the shirt yet, I'm suspecting that's just a matter of getting around to it, in fairness to her. But I wanted to make that point for everybody here. Judging by how nice she's done it with the face and the part that she spent more time on, I'm confident it's going to look nice. It's going to be a strong painting. It'll be a nice, strong painting.